You are live.
All right, well, welcome everybody to this crazy evening. And hopefully we have quorum. We have 5 people, so we should be good to go. And I'll call the this meeting to order of the Charter Revision Commission on July 1st, 2021 at 6:06 p.m. And if you'll do roll call, Takia.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Andrew Hare. Nope. Benjamin Mednick.
Present.
Eileen Leahy.
Here.
Jeffrey Durand. Lawrence Harris Jr. Minor Carter. Paul Rankin.
Present.
Robert Tufts.
Here.
And Ron Schneider.
Here.
Okay, so I just want to note that Andy Hare we anticipated he would not be here. And Jeff Durand is away out of town. And also just to note that we're having severe weather in the Annapolis area, which may be preventing some other members to be present this evening. So hopefully they'll be able to join us. So I appreciate you all getting through. Paul, did you want to say something?
No. Well, I would only say that Andy had an operation, and he seems to be doing fine. I will tell you that.
Great. So Paul doesn't have power at his house, so he is on the phone. So being the next in line of this illustrious group, I'll be chairing this evening. So next order of business is the approval of the minutes for June 15th, 2021. They were distributed a few days ago, and hopefully everyone had a chance to look at them. Any changes, comments, concerns?
Move their adoption.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay. Public testimony. We did have a number of people forth some comments on our website and sent some comments in, which I think is great. I think some of them were in response to Andy's article in the paper, which I hope everybody got to see. So I'm just going to go ahead and read out the names and just give a little synopsis of what their points were in case everyone didn't get a chance to look at them yet. First one's from Albert Kirschner, P.O. Box 3363, Annapolis, Maryland, 21403. He is a city resident and he is in support of nonpartisan elections. And he's in support of a referendum for voters to decide on nonpartisan elections. Next one is Lisa Rodvian of 219 Farragut Road, Annapolis, Maryland, 21401. She is a city resident. She is also a county councilwoman for the Annapolis. She talks about city oversight of the HACA and the HACA board needing to be strengthened. She also recommends that the committee system for the city council be scrapped, and also to consider increasing the salary of council members and provide them each with a full-time aide. The third comment came from Debbie Yasik, who is at 418 Fox Hollow Lane, Annapolis, Maryland, 21403. She also is a city resident. She's in support of nonpartisan elections and supports a county council manager form of government. So those are the 3 comments that we got. Any comments on those?
I'd like to just provide some reflection if I could, maybe get some thought rolling. I think it's great that we got 3 responses. I think that's the most we've gotten in one of these periods here. And we should take anything we can get. One thing that concerned me a little bit, and I think you saw it especially in the 3rd submission. Can you repeat the name, Eileen? It was
Oh,
Ms.
it's
Zung,
Debbie Yasik, YAS.
right.
I think UK.
One thing that concerned me is if you really think about the trajectory of what she writes in there. On the one hand, there's deeply held opinions on certain matters. In her case, I think it was nonpartisan elections. On the other hand, she looks to this commission to help push that concept along. And then on a third hand, she sort of ends it with, but you can't do anything about it anyways. And so I just wanted to throw out there for everyone's consideration, the idea of our outreach and how we've been trying to codify it into a uniform approach so that we can get consistent responses, or at least consistent lines of thought, even though we get diverse responses to them. But also the outreach, the passive outreach, meaning coming into us without our prompting, and really getting in between the lines, I think, when it comes to some of these things that we're about to hand in to the city, if you will, whether it's the interim report or the final. I feel like there's still a large role for us to do real positive work in a way that could be adopted. But we're going to have to really walk a fine line between outlining the possible that the city ought to pursue, or repeat past mistakes of diving into, I guess, more political approaches that, as the third writer indicated, could simply be struck down because these are just recommendations. So, to end what I'm trying to get at, I'm not saying that we shouldn't consider all issues, but I do think we should take to heart the confusion out there as to what the people are asking for, what the city charter is about, and what this commission can do. And I personally would like this commission to be one that was successful to the extent that things were adopted. And I think if we focus on things like vision and ways vision might come about, and structures in which the political players could implement vision down the line, we may have more success in producing something that's adoptable by the city.
Right.
That's all.
Well, to that point, I think the other side of that also is how do we educate and empower our citizens to take up issues and to see them through. And for instance, again, going back to nonpartisan elections, I've served on the elections board for 7 years. Before that, I was on the ad hoc committee. In the 7 years I've been on the Board of Elections, nonpartisan elections has never been brought to the Board of Elections.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're the party, we're the committee or the board that could actually facilitate that sort of thing. But I don't know if it's a question that maybe in the bigger grouping of things, people aren't as interested, or people don't understand really how the government works and who do they talk to and how do they actually enact change. And I think that's another piece of maybe what we're
seeing. So for me, Eileen, what you just said there may be the crux of it as it relates to what this commission can do with the charter. Mm-hmm. My interview this week with Alderman Schandelmeyer revealed certain feelings as related to the committee structure that's prevalent in this city. And we just heard from, I believe it was the second submittal or the first?
Yes, the second.
Right. And I agree that perhaps one of the issues is that the citizens are left in the dark, if you will, because there's simply too many, I'll call them layers, right. But I don't quite think that that's what the structure is here. It's almost like an atomization. So again, just to not go on all night, I think that it may be worthwhile to consider these specific issues, but more in the context of how is the city structured so that the people can more effectively get from A to B, whether A is, a specific issue about how we vote and how candidates are presented to us, and B is, a referendum to change things. A simplification of the relationship might be what needs to be addressed, which could encompass things like committees, departments, and, the major aspects of the charter.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Ben. We'll move forward. The chair's report will defer since Andy's not here. I'll go ahead and review briefly our executive committee report, which is posted on our website for everybody to review if they'd like. We talked about outreach and the progress that's being made with both community groups and individuals, but it does appear that the community groups are a little slower coming in. At the last meeting, we talked about wrapping this up at the end of June, but in talking, we thought we would recommend to everybody that we keep going till July 9th. But after that, kind of we have to say we're done, partly because we've got the mid-report coming up. That's not to say if something comes up, I guess we couldn't include it, but we really have to kind of wrap this up a bit. Again, just asking everybody to get some notes in. I think Andy included that in his last email. Bullet points are fine. It doesn't have to be fancy, but so getting the gist in, and we've gotten some great ones in already. We also wanted to.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question? For those notes, are we just literally doing bullet points at this point, or are we filling in the templates and trying to use those as the bullet points?
You can do it, but there have been, most of them have been coming in before we got the template.
Got it.
So
Right.
they've been bullet points.
Got it.
And there may be some others coming in, but I think it can go either way.
All right.
I know for mine, I've just done a summary of the group reports, and then I'm looking at some of that. I'm using the template that you have mostly, and also looking at what I'm working on in the group, but that's just me personally.
Got it.
Paul, did you have something? Paul, you're
No, I have the reports that I've put in are related or sort of more along the prose and bullet point lines. But I plan to use the template for the next interview I do with Councilman Arnett.
Right. It does look like people, the more recent reports are using the questions as an outline, the talking points. I know I used them in my last one. I think, Ben, you used them in yours.
Yeah.
Okay. We did talk about the template. Thank you, Ben, for posting that. And I guess one of the questions we were looking at was, in addition to, say, community groups, were you looking at that also to be used within the working groups?
Yes.
Okay, so that answers that question. So we can use it in a number of ways. We also looked at another template, which was being considered in terms of maybe a potential template for the final report. It was a link that I found from the National Civic League, and I can send that out if people are interested. The National Civic League has a model city charter. The last one was in 2011, and they're in the midst of revising it. The timing is not great for us. It's going to come out in November of 2021. But it looks at how they present their different articles in different areas by doing a basic commentary, then citing sources of authority, and then proposing actions to be taken. And also has an area on intent. And then we also talked about perhaps doing outcomes, which is, I know, something that Andy has brought up in the past. So I can send that out to people, and it would be something just to consider if we wanted to look at a structure for the final report. We're still a bit of ways from that, but we can start looking at that.
Could I interrupt you there, Eileen? This is
Sure.
Paul. I just want to emphasize what this document that Eileen's going to send out to everybody it's very interesting. I mean, it's not as relevant, obviously, as she mentioned, as it could or should be, but it does provide you with kind of a way to look at things. You don't necessarily have to agree with it, but I really urge everybody to look at it, and then it does give you a structure, and then obviously ours doesn't have to reflect it or anything else, but it's a great way to begin to organize your thoughts, and then we can go from there. Thanks.
Okay, so I'll get that out to everybody. We also talked, keeping along the lines of the final report, we talked about who's going to write it. Um, And again, what is the structure going to be? So since Andy's not here, we could certainly just put it all on him. My father, when I first started going to meetings and joining groups, my father used to always say, always go to a meeting, because if you don't, you're going to find out you're in charge of something. So, but those were some of the discussions we were having. We then moved on to the midterm report, which I know Takia probably may have something to add to us. We have heard back from Hillary that we may be able to have an in-person, I should say, Hillary Raftovich is oversees boards and commissions and constituent services. And Andy had touched base with, I believe, the mayor to find out what opportunities we might have, since in August, City Hall is pretty much closed down. But we can have an in-person meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. I back up. I jumped ahead. Let me go back. Midterm report. I'm sorry. I got into our other work session. I was meant to talk about the city council work session. That's July 15th. It's in person in the city council chambers. Takia, you can answer a question for me. Can more than 5 people attend that meeting without it being a quorum? So everybody could go if they wanted.
Yes, we just had a work session with the Maritime Task Force,
Okay,
and like their whole committee was there, so.
okay, all right.
I'm sorry, Eileen, I'm a little confused. So the July 15th, you're talking about the working session that we wanted to do?
No, I confused you all. I started out and I flipped it. I had work session in my head and went straight to our work session when I should have been talking about the one with the city council.
So this is the city council work session,
And this will be our interim report.
Right,
and this, right, that's where you'll deliver your
Okay. And that is at what time?
3:00.
3:00.
And is this something that all commission members would be expected to join?
I don't think so. I mean, it's up to you guys.
So that's something we discuss. Got it.
Right. I think in our executive committee meeting, it was not, we weren't clear if we could do it or not. Andy is prepared to present. So Paul, if you have a comment about that, I don't, we were just concerned that we couldn't have more than, say, 4 because it would be quorum. But if that's not an issue, I think.
It's not, because work sessions, it's not your meeting. It's a meeting that you guys are invited to. And also there aren't any voting, there isn't any voting that takes place in work sessions. So you're fine. Like, they don't even need a quorum to
Okay.
hold a work session.
Okay.
Well, I hope everybody can come, and those who can't, that's okay. But that would be great. The more the merrier, I think, for that, to show support for our effort. But we should talk, Eileen, as I know you will, about sort of getting that report together.
Right. Takia, can you make sure that everybody on the commission gets an invite?
Sure, they haven't gone out yet.
Okay.
I don't do those, but I'll be sending you guys one. I might just go ahead and put it on your guys' calendar.
Okay.
But there's nothing attached to the invite. I just want to make that clear, because the meeting is actually held in person in city council chambers.
Okay. But will it be recorded?
All of their meetings are recorded.
Okay. All right.
Can I ask a question too, Takia? This is Paul.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Sure.
Is our report one of many things on the agenda, or is it just to hear our report?
No, so you guys will have an hour. Usually for their work sessions, they try to have at the very most 2 items. And I believe that day there are 2. So it's you and there's something else.
There's elections.
Right, that's right, because Eileen's staying put.
And I'm
So
taking all of it now. Yeah, elections is first on the agenda, and then the commission is second on the agenda.
And it's a 1-hour session.
It's 2 hours.
the work session is from 3 to 5. They usually try to give each item an hour.
Okay, wow.
So Andy is planning to put together a 2-page document highlighting what we've been doing, not drawing any conclusions at this point. There was talk about including an attachment to list all of the community groups and individuals that we've talked to give some background to what we've been doing and who we've contacted. He'd like to include the bullet points from each working group, which I think he mentioned in his last email, and we can go over that tonight when we go through the working groups. He is planning to get a draft out beforehand.
Eileen, I'm sorry, we've lost someone.
Do we lose Paul? He seems to be coming in and out.
No, I'm still
No,
here.
Paul's
Oh,
here.
Rob.
We lost Rob,
Oh,
so
Rob.
right now you don't have a quorum.
All right, well, let's give him a couple of minutes if he can get in. I'll text him. Okay.
And we still chat without a quorum?
I think we're supposed to kind of hold off.
Yeah,
Okay.
Got it.
you're supposed to hold off, yep.
Hey, Rob, we lost you. Okay. All right, no problem. Bye. He's logging back in.
Here he is.
All right. Welcome back. So we were looking at the bullet points, which we can review a little bit more in working groups. So if Andy can get bullet points or what you want included for your particular area included in the mid-report, he'd like those. Paul, I think we said what, the 7th, July 7th, so he could get everything drafted by the 9th.
Yeah, I think, that would be great. I think we were talking about, and Andy will start to draft. Everybody can provide bullet points. The idea would be that he'd throw out some sort of a draft for people to look at by, what did we say, the 9th, I guess it was, Eileen, or
He
so.
was gonna draft
so
by the
that-
9th and get it out to everybody by that Monday.
Yeah,
So you'd
and
have
then
the week
everybody can,
to comment.
yeah. Sorry, without seeing people, this is terrible. But yes, and then, the idea here is that you'll have a draft that you can work with and critique and add or ask for deletions from, but that's got to get done pretty quickly because we've got to go on the 15th at 3:00, obviously. But I don't see that as a problem. I hope, does everybody find that a reasonable time frame?
Yes.
Okay. And then I think the plan is to email it out to city council members beforehand and then also to bring hard copies that evening. So on to the next work session, which is our work session. And I apologize for the confusion. We did talk about that. Since we met, a couple of things have come forth. It does look like we're going to be able to have an in-person meeting. Still not sure if it can be a hybrid. Takia, you probably haven't even heard about this. This all just came in right before our meeting, I guess. Andy sent an email to the mayor and I guess Hillary sent something back. So we're still not clear. I'm still not clear on it, but it does look
Did
like.
she, do
person.
you know if she cleared that with David?
I believe she did.
Okay.
And I believe what I also saw was that it would likely be over at Pitt Moyer. So the question then becomes for us, we had, I guess, at the last meeting talked about doing it either the first week of August and the last week of July would be a second option. So we have a limited number of us this evening, but just to get some feedback as to what people's availability is, say on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of that week. I know some of us are retired, but many are not retired and are working. So what kind of time frame works? I mean, 3 to 7, 6 to 9 seems kind of late, but what are people's options?
For me, if we're talking the first week of August, I'm just looking at my calendar here. The Tuesday or the Wednesday, I could make any of those time periods work. The Thursday would be tough.
Okay.
This is Paul. I too can make Tuesday, Wednesday. Either one of those is great by me. Time frames are open, sort of 3 o'clock on. But to keep going, what do you think, everyone, and Eileen in particular? You've done these before. Is 4 or 5 hours type meeting, that sort of thing, or is that too long, or is that what do you see happening here?
Well, we were talking about 4 hours. The goals that we kind of have set were to review the materials and information culled from all of the reports, build consensus on priorities and recommendations, and begin drafting the final report. So those were the 3 areas that we had talked about as far as the goals.
So I kind of feel like if people can do it, and I recognizing that some may not, so we obviously will accommodate that, but fresher is better. I would sort of suggest maybe starting at 3 and running to 7 if we can. What's everybody else think?
Yeah,
I
this is
think the
Ron.
three,
I can accommodate that.
You can?
Yeah, I can adjust my schedule. Yep.
I think those 3 topics are the right ones, and I think you'll need 4 hours to hopefully get there. So
Yeah.
What about you,
How about
Rob?
Rob?
Yeah, the afternoon would be fine during that week. I would, I think we might even want to look at like a second work session as well along the way, because I think I'm not as optimistic as Ben is. Sorry, Ben. I think we'll probably end up needing a little bit more time.
All right. Well, and it may be too that if we start with 1 work session and we need additional work sessions, it might be even something we can split up and come back together. So, so I can send out something. I'll touch base with Hillary and also be in communication with Takia and send something out to see if we can get a date and some time. But if 3 to 7 seems like it's going to work for most of us, that might be helpful. We can all get home and have dinner with our families and all that. So, okay. So I did mention the purposes of the work session. Anything else, Paul, that you want to, looks like Paul may have lost his connection.
No, I'm
Paul,
good.
you there?
I'm
Okay.
here. Yeah.
On my
Now, the
screen,
only
you
other
keep
thing-
clicking on off.
Well, just typical me. The only other thing that I was thinking is that I know Eileen and I had spoken a bit earlier today, talking about what to do in Andy's absence. And one of the things that came up during the course of our conversation was the possibility of trying to get something of a preamble, much like I believe Ron had kind of drafted, at least started drafting together, to be able to present to the council as a sort of broad spectrum look, at our approach. And I don't know whether that's doable or not in the time frame we have, but I thought it would be useful to throw out there to everyone. I like the idea of sort of giving the council this something to see that we are looking at things in an inclusive and broad manner.
Well, so Andy
might appreciate
actually
that.
did that and sent something in. And I had provided something in that regard in a preamble to modify the existing one, and he augmented that. So I think we have that. It's probably on the Google Drive.
Okay.
That I think addresses what you're talking about. But
Right.
It's exactly what I'm talking about. I don't know if everybody else has read it, and I have not put the 2 together. Or are you saying that Andy's is the one we should look at, or is yours the one we should look at? Or
well,
should
so
we try to-
what Andy did was took what I did and he modified a couple times, and then he augmented that. So I'm not sure, Eileen. I'm sure that's on the Google Drive. I'm not sure what it's called, but it was an expansion of that I think went beyond the kind of simplistic statements that I made and added to it.
So
with-
Ron,
with some
if I could just
notion of
clarify,
intent.
though, for those of us that want to go back to this, you believe there's one updated document out there?
I believe that. Eileen, am I correct?
I think there is one. I had lost one of Andy's emails. I found it. It was in another folder, so I'll look for it. So I can look for it and send it out with a specific request to read and provide feedback.
Thank
So
you.
I
let me
think-
do this first. I will find that email that he sent to me
Okay,
with what he added onto it, and I'll send it to you. And then you can confirm that that is in fact what's there. Okay. And
okay.
then send that one out.
Because I think what's happening also, we have so many things kind of coming back and forth that maybe if we need action on something, we can just send that out separately. So that'd be great if you could do that, Ron. And then I'll also touch base and make sure that everybody's getting it. So it seems to be working when I send things out through that email, everybody gets the email. But I am still hearing some people are having difficulty getting into the drive.
Technical question.
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry if I come across as technically arrogant. You know that with our Drive documents, you can email them directly to the group to collaborate?
No, I don't know how to do that. I
Okay.
mean,
The reason why I'm asking is it makes it very easy to connect everyone to one working document.
I will look at it. I'm still techno naive.
I can certainly help you.
Okay, that'd be
It is
great.
very, very easy. But it's better than downloading a file, sending it to 10 different people and then having them work on 10 different
Okay,
documents.
well, this would be a good thing to start on, so that'd be great.
All right.
Okay, I'll follow up with you on that.
Yeah, I would go as far. I mean, I don't know how this document is stored. Is it a Google Doc or is it like a Word doc that's been uploaded?
Well, even if it's Word, we could turn it into a Google Doc and then share it out.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, depending on what kind of doc it is, I kind of second Ben's suggestion, to try to put these docs, as Google Docs, because then we can all comment on them, see what each other's comments are, so on and so forth.
Right.
I've been getting them and sometimes I get them directly from my home email. Sometimes I'm getting them through the shared, through the commission. They come in different forms, so I think that's a good idea as far as,
The beauty of emailing out the Google Doc is people will link right into the doc. So if they're having trouble getting into the Drive, that's sort of irrelevant.
okay,
They'll just be able to go into the doc. And then if they provide comments, like Rob said, we'll see each other's names and we'll see each other's comments. So
okay, sounds good. All right, well, this will be a good test run.
This will be fabulous, and Ben is hired, right? So I take it. Is it proper to take that everybody concurs that we should endeavor to try and get this small piece of our work more or less done so that Andy can present it at his midterm report?
yeah, I think we're on our way.
It's reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, it's a draft and it can still be a working document, but I think it may help set the tone at the work session.
Mhm.
So. okay,
Wonderful, wonderful.
All right, let's see. Next on the agenda is outreach. I know it's 6:40 already. Time flies when we're having fun. So Paul, do you want to touch base about the outreach committee or you just want me to go and have everybody go round robin?
Go round robin because all of my stuff was on a computer and I didn't download it in time before I died. So
Okay. Overall, it
Apologies.
sounds like people are making some headway. I know for myself, I sent out 4 emails to community groups, heard back from one that said they would send it out to the director, didn't hear back. And that was after two emails. I did meet with Sharon Kennedy, who is a former chair of the HPC. And I met with Rob Savage the other day. So those are my update on who I've met with. I do have an appointment to meet with the city clerk. And I think in looking at the overall sign up sheet, pretty much all the aldermen are getting contacted and meeting with people. And I think a number of the department heads, I think Paul is going to touch base with Sally Nash. And so
Sally Nash, yeah.
that's great. So that's my update. Ben, what have,
Just a note, when I send out that, I sent a note to Sally asking for her to set up, so I'll send a note out to folks when I get that appointment.
okay. Anybody else want to update on what they're doing with outreach and,
I handed in notes from Shandelmeyer, which happened this week. I used our questionnaire. It was about an hour long. The responses, I think, were excellent within the context of the responses from a council member. And I'm still striking out with Finlayson.
okay,
And I guess between now and whenever, since I've kind of already done the one and I'm striking out on the other, I'd certainly join anybody for maybe a community group, which I haven't done yet. I would enjoy doing that. I don't know if there's any out there that are lagging or are available, or if you guys need somebody to do it, I'd like to throw myself out there. So.
okay, great.
And this is Ron. Yeah, I'm available too. If there are people we need to cover that haven't been covered, my schedule's pretty flexible.
Okay. Ron, I know you've talked with Ellie a few times. Have you actually met with her and gone over any of those questions?
I met with her a couple times on that. And then it's interesting that she seemed to kind of think that those meetings and then what she sent, and I've sent those all those comments in a couple times, were sufficient, and she considered that to be a meeting. So
Okay.
I mean, I could try to reach out to her again, but I think she made the points that she wants to make, and doesn't think she needs to meet again in person. So
Okay. Okay, Rob?
Community group wise, met with Brianna Cuffey and last week, and that was a very fascinating conversation. I submitted my report to Eileen this morning, so as soon as that gets posted, I encourage the commission to read through that. It really kind of presented sort of a different perspective, I think, in some ways, than what we've been looking at. Brianna Cuffey is someone who can trace her history, her family, all the way back to the slaves who were freed in South County, and who then made their way up to Eastport to try to make a living for themselves post-Civil War. And so she has a very interesting perspective. I know a lot of folks tend to be or at least myself, as someone who hasn't grown up in Annapolis, tend to be a little bit more familiar with the old Fourth Ward, but she spoke a lot about kind of the African-American community in Eastport at that time and the impact that the annexation of Eastport had on that African-American community, and how that impact is still felt today in a lot of ways. So I would especially encourage Ron, you and Andy to review that report, because I placed some recommendations in there based on my conversation with her about what we might be able to do to add some acknowledgement about kind of Annapolis's role and kind of some of the bad policies that have happened in the past towards African Americans, in terms of trying to acknowledge that maybe in some of the preambles, or at least an acknowledgement of like, hey, we're going to try not to do this again, because I know you're trying to make it a little bit more positive sounding, forward looking. So, and one of the other real quick takeaway I want to present to the group from this, because I thought it was a really interesting perspective that I had not heard before, and yet about 24 hours later, completely unprompted, there was yet another person who said the same thing to me, and that is the question of, is Annapolis too big? That there are sort of multiple Annapolises in a way, right? Different, large constituencies within the city of Annapolis. And is Annapolis too big in that it really cannot service all those different communities, in the ways that you would expect a municipality to be able to service those communities? So I thought that was an interesting question.
I heard the same question in one of mine in terms of meeting with Sharon Kennedy, the same sort of thing. And one almost wonders if some of it is because the the boundaries have become so blurred as far as what's Annapolis and what's the city and what isn't.
Mhm.
I imagine Lawrence would have some feelings about that, given
No,
we're
absolutely.
being on the edge with the county, but I've heard that, and sometimes it's within the context of just services.
Mhm. Um,
Can I
Also-
want to make one, I'm sorry, one other comment,
Sure.
Rob. I did read your report with Brianna, and I think also it is worthwhile to look at that in the context of looking at our preamble. Because she talked about, we have colonial history, but we also have a lot of other history in terms of African-American history. So I'm going to look at it for myself in terms of also making sure when we look at the preamble that we're including, all sorts of diversity, but including that type of diversity. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's an excellent point. Thanks for adding that, Eileen. Also met with Alderman Paone. That was Andy's meeting. So, and I think he took the majority of the notes. I don't know if my notes would do justice to the meeting. Unfortunately, we did not. I don't think we were using the template, or if Andy was, he was kind of, maybe just kind of going off the cuff along with the template. Of course, Paone is very much in favor of nonpartisan elections. Obviously, he introduced the legislation, but we spoke about a lot of other aspects regarding some of the things that we've talked about regarding like some of the really specific requirements for job descriptions in the charter and things like that. And so hopefully Andy, when he's back, he'd be able to make a more thorough kind of report on that meeting. It was interesting to sort of get his opinions and his approach, his approach to some of these issues. And I did meet with Hagerstown City Clerk and the Board of Elections via telephone, but I think I'll save that for our electoral group update. So.
Okay. All right. Welcome, Minor. Let me see. I think you've joined us.
And it should be added, Minor joined me for that meeting with Brianna.
Okay.
So I was
Okay, great.
not alone. He was there as well. So
Great.
it was a very
Okay.
good conversation.
All right, good. All right, did we, Minor, I think you may be on mute. We are talking about what our outreach has been. So if you
Yeah.
have something,
I've been listening, but I haven't been talking, which is always good.
okay. Is there anything you want to contribute, that you want to add as far as any meetings that you've had or outreach? I know you've met with Rob, with Brianna, and also, I think you did one other one too.
Well, I've met, but I haven't finished the meeting because with John Hammond, which is much more voluminous as always than two simple meetings. But he has, but as you know, John goes back a long way in this, particularly in Ward 1.
Okay. Well, that'd be great if you can use the template that Ben sent out and
Yeah.
maybe pull together a report that would.
I will, in the next few days. I gotta run it by John. I don't want to misquoting.
Okay, that'd be great. All right. Any other comments, or Paul? I think you've had some meetings.
I have not,
Okay.
not in the last
you're
2
good.
weeks.
Okay. All right. Any other comments as far as outreach and meetings with community groups? All right, well, moving along to our working the working groups. I don't have my whole group in front of me. I know we've already talked about the preamble, which is Article 1, or actually there's the preamble. Anything else further to add for that? Ron, you and Andy are working on that.
No, I don't have anything now.
Okay, number 2 is the general provisions. I think that's Andy and Minor. Anything to add for that, updates?
And no, I'm failed on that. I got to get on that.
Okay. Then Article 2 is elections. Paul and Rob, anything you want to talk about Hagerstown?
Yeah.
Go, Rob.
And if we
So-
can keep it just, actually, let me preface this. If we could this evening, a little bit for time, but also at the executive, Paul and I were talking a little earlier. If you have three specific points that you can also include this evening for the mid-report, that would be great. If you have to send them in later, that's understandable, but I just wanted to put that when we start. I'm sorry, Rob, go ahead.
Sure. So I met via phone yesterday with the Washington County Board of Elections as well, both the director and deputy director, as well as the city clerk for the city of Hagerstown. I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible because I did do a fairly decent write-up that I submitted to Eileen prior to this meeting. So my report probably won't be up there right away. So to give you the highlights, Hagerstown has been the most recent community, most recent municipality in Annapolis to switch from partisan to nonpartisan elections. And not only did they do that, but they also, as part of their sort of election reform, they also moved the date of their election from being an off year to coinciding with the presidential election. We discussed sort of the process that the city of Hagerstown went through for that, and how those two changes were implemented. They implemented the date change first, and then they implemented the switch to nonpartisan elections. Both of those were ballot questions, by the way. I don't know the result of the date change, but the nonpartisan question was overwhelming, close to 70%. They spoke all three individuals spoke very positively about both reforms. They did not really see much downside. There was not a lot of sort of pushback in the community or from political leaders, political parties about these changes. In fact, the city clerk seemed to believe that it might have actually benefited the city in some ways, and that people who maybe had been traditionally on the fence were more likely to run for office because they didn't have to navigate sort of the political, primary process. What was the last thing? They did acknowledge that it does take some work up front to get those changes in place. Especially because not only did they do all those changes, but then also the Washington County BOE also started administering, obviously, their elections because they coincided with the presidential election. Here in Annapolis, we already have our county BOE administering it, so we've kind of already jumped that
Did
hurdle.
they say if there was any positive fiscal response to doing that?
Yes, from a couple of standpoints. One being just you're not. The city of Hagerstown no longer had to put out the funds to run their own election or even to have a board of elections. I think they actually got rid of their board of elections entirely, it sounded like, because everything was being run straight out of the county office at that point. So there was that sort of, that was one sort of budget item that the city of Hagerstown did not have to worry about anymore. The other issue that I thought was interesting that a lot of people tend to overlook is the efficiency in polling places. It's actually Eileen can probably talk about this. It's very difficult to find polling places. Traditionally it's schools, but they were saying like, unlike a presidential election where it's like a holiday in Maryland, right? So all the schools are closed. In the city of Hagerstown, they would have their polling places in schools, but then they would have to hire security guards since they were, they had all these strangers going into the schools. So they had to hire additional security guards to secure the location there at the school. So that was another way that they were able to save some money. So.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, it should be noted though, this was all prompted on their part because they had very low voter turnout. Their voter turnout was only 15%. That's
wow.
abysmally low. Yeah. Annapolis is double that at 30%. It's still not up, obviously at the levels of like a statewide or presidential election, but so they were really kind of in dire straits. So they were really sort of, I don't want to say desperate, but it seemed like they were kind of desperate to like do something to spark some life into their system. So, and like I said, the full report, if you all have any, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me after you read the report.
All right, well, great. Article 3, I can't think offhand what Article 3 is. Do any of us have Article 3?
Hours.
Powers. I think that's an Andy one. So we'll skip that one.
Well, I'm on that and I think.
Oh, I'm
Minor's
sorry,
on that
Ron.
as well, yeah.
Anything to report?
I mean, nothing other than, what we've kind of talked about before. I don't know anything about annexation and some of those issues. So if there's someone smarter on those things about leasing property and buying property and stuff like that, that's important. I haven't seen anything in the commentary that people have submitted on that subject. And then the other issue that I have is, I think there's opportunity to kind of clean and refresh that section up. And it seems a little bit interesting to me that most of that section talks about sewage and water treatment, which are certainly important to all of us, but it begs the question of is that more important than anything else that the city does? And so there may be an opportunity to kind of say, let's put some of those crazy details into some other document and not mess up the charter with 2 pages of sewage and 2 pages of water treatment.
So Ron, perhaps could you maybe, when I get that link out for that model city charter, maybe take a look at how the powers in that is covered and maybe from some other areas and see what exactly is included in some of the other cities as far as powers.
I will.
Maybe
Yep.
we need to add some things and take some things away. but
Yep,
that might
okay.
be great to have some comparison. Okay, great. Article 4 is the city council, which Minor and I have been working on. Minor, chime in if you'd like. The 3 areas that I've been kind of consolidating because I've gotten some comments. There've been some other comments that I've gotten from people and from my interviews. Was to define the limits on conduct of aldermen and alderwomen. It's in there, but it doesn't define anything or give anything as far as the process. Clarify how aldermen and alderwomen may or may not direct the work of city employees and communications with them. And then the 3rd bullet point for the mid-report would be define the legislative procedure in the charter. Currently, the legislative procedure, I believe, is mostly in code and it's not really clear. So those are kind of the highlights that I'm looking at a little bit more closely. Do you have anything to add for that, Minor, in the city council?
John Hammond and I have been talking about it, but we haven't been able, we're supposed to meet on it the last 3 weeks, but his agenda and my agenda we've not been able to do it, but we're supposed to meet either Monday or Tuesday because he has been on the council and had strong ideas, always has strong ideas. Maybe as I say, if you've dealt with John, you know that.
Right. Well, maybe we can share some of that information back and forth outside of the meeting. Then the next Article 5 is the mayor, which again, it's Minor and myself. Again, the 3 kind of bullet points that have come up are to consider governance models. The current one is considered a weak governance model with the mayor. And I believe it was Lisa Radovan in her public comments I think she was the one that talked about a different model. I may be wrong. No, it was Debbie Yassick talked about a different model. So again, that has come up a few times. Is this the best model for Annapolis that we have now? The second point would be identifying direct reports to the mayor. That apparently hasn't been completely clear. And then another item that has come up in talking with people is the Office of Law and how that interacts with the mayor and the city council. There have apparently been at the council level a lot of discussions about separation of powers. And that's always not clear.
That's been a dispute for years.
Mm-hmm. So those are kind of the areas that I'm going to try to do a little bit more investigate, a little bit more research on. Anything else, Minor, you want to add?
No, I'm sorry. I have some stuff, but I got to get it down, not just blabber on.
Okay. So Article 6, I believe, is operations. I'm sorry, I don't have my list in front of me.
That's right. It's Paul, Ben, and Eileen.
Yeah.
I don't think we've done any work. Ben, have you done anything in the last couple of weeks?
I thought I was Article 8 and 9.
What's that?
I thought I was Article 8 and 9.
Oh, I thought I had you down for 6 too. But anyway, if it's Paul and Eileen, I don't think we've done anything on this.
Do you want
Yeah.
me to, I can certainly go to work very quickly. I've got a holiday weekend coming up.
Well, I have included your questions that you had made some comments when I was meeting with Hillary Ratovich as far as the boards and commissions. I have done some work on the boards and commissions, but haven't done a report. So I would like to get that out to you all. I think the general consensus is that there's too many, but there's also having to have an understanding of what is mandated and what isn't. That's not particularly clear. Consistency in terms of how people are recruited. So there are a number of options. I've met with Hillary, and it's also boards and commissions has come up. I've seen in other reports. It came up with my talk with Alderman Savage. Come up in some incidental conversations with people too. So I'll get that out.
Wasn't there a public comment about commissions?
Yes. Now that was about, she was talking about the standing committees that the city council has,
Oh, okay.
which is like the rules committee, the finance committee, transportation. And those are some of the ones I'm not quite clear which ones are mandated. One of the overwhelming things, again, even with the charter and the code, is definitions. What's a board versus a commission versus a committee? Which ones are quasi judicial? Which ones have rules and which ones don't? There's all different types. There's all different processes. Hillary feels that it could be pulled together in terms of maybe the process of identifying people. That also goes into the whole concept of diversity. How do you recruit for boards and commissions? How do you make boards and commissions reflect the overall population? So those are some of the things that I've talked about. And again, I apologize for not getting that put into a report, but
I would kind of second that in terms of making that a priority area to pursue. I think it certainly was a hidden topic when we first started here, but I agree that, just feedback from the interviews and the outreach, that it's an interesting problem. I mean, commissions, committees, and boards, I'm increasingly aware of a feeling that it's actually one of the mechanisms that's separating citizens from government and effectiveness.
mhm.
And we ought to really look into this as an area that is partly responsible for some of the larger issues that we have been discussing all along. I know when I spoke to Alderman Schandelmeyer this week, I mean, he was talking about the range of powers of these various groups, if you will.
Mhm.
But the fact that they are populated by individuals.
Mhm.
And so at the end of the day, even if the individuals are heartfelt or competent in their role, it doesn't lead to the type of coordinated governance that you would expect of a city that's providing services and looking to make large scale decisions for the future, whether that's investment or not. So
Yeah, some of the committees or boards are really communication conduits with the county, where for
Right.
people to feel like they can go to this committee and say something.
yeah,
The other thing that has come up, and I could have even mentioned this with the city council, is term limits.
Yeah.
There are some people that have been on these commissions and boards for, one person I believe has been on for more than one decade. I mean, we've been on elections. I'm moving on 8 years. So there has been talk about that. Hillary does talk about the challenges with finding volunteers and also finding people that don't have a conflict of interest.
right.
If they're doing business in the city. So it's a challenge. She has implemented an educational program and a newsletter, which is great and has really been kicked off in the past few months. And I think that's done a lot for pulling the groups together and hopefully getting some of that information out to citizens also.
It,
I'm
it
not
seems like for
aware,
a city that's relatively small, roles, responsibilities, lines of authority on committees, commissions, all those kinds of things is maybe more complicated than it needs to be.
I would agree with that, but even more so, I mean, we're talking about diversity and inclusion, and I'm not aware of any mandate at all that any board, commission, or committee have a minimum representation of wards across the city. Is that correct?
Not in my review of them.
Right. And so right there, just structurally, you've allowed for captured areas of a layer of government.
Right. Well, we could get in, we could get into a whole discussion about that because, diversity is beyond just even racial diversity, in terms of gender, socioeconomic, political. And I think that's where some of the complication sometimes comes in terms of do you want to be putting check marks next to committees also? Because some of the
yeah, I don't disagree.
members, yeah.
I don't disagree at all. But again, the charter is about powers and authorities.
Mhm.
And we're talking about representation of city government, if you will, the people to the government. So, for me, if there's a layer of our structure that's cumbersome, and I'm increasingly believing that this is one of them,
Mhm.
And if these committees and commissions and boards have enough effective power that it interferes in the citizens' relationship with the city,
Mhm.
then mandating representation across the city by some measure, right? And I think ward is the easiest measure in this city. I think is at least it may not be the sufficient definition, but at least it's one that starts a process of diversification.
Okay.
Well, I think if we can help to educate the citizens of Annapolis on how they can participate in their government, beyond just the obvious thing, which is voting. What are the opportunities to share your voice and to participate in various fora and committees and commissions of interest to you would be helpful, because I don't think that's very clear right now.
Well, I'll see if I can talk with her about some of those communications. So,
Eileen, before you go on, yeah, just a question, really no adding. We had talked earlier at an earlier meeting about getting lists. Do we have a list of all the boards, commissions, and whatever the heck are out there?
I created a list. There is a list on the city website, but you have to dig a little bit deeper in each one of them. And I put together, before I met with Hillary, kind of a consolidation, and I can share that if people want it, on what is their major objective, or their how many people are on it, how many vacancies there are, that sort of thing. I didn't list individuals, just numbers.
Yeah, I don't know how deep we need to get into it, but I think before we have much more discussion on this, we ought to know what it is we're talking about. And
Okay.
That starts with what exists.
Right. So I think if I'll get my report with meeting with Hillary out, and that will help a lot. We did discuss the types of committees that probably could be consolidated. There are some that are still on the books that really aren't meeting any longer, and then some of them are mandated. So I'll pull that together.
Give me an assignment if you need to. I'm happy to do it
Okay.
on that.
I think, yeah, just reviewing it once I have it, it's on my computer and nobody else's. So. All right, next one, Article 7. Again, I'm not quite sure where we are since I don't have it in front of me.
That's finances.
Okay, and that I
Jeff
believe,
and Andy.
yes, so we'll defer
I don't think-
that.
Yeah.
And then number 8, I think that's you, Ben.
Yeah, I have nothing new to add to it. Paul, you don't have anything new to add, do you?
I don't, but you and I should probably gin up a couple of talking points for Andy. We
Yeah,
just
and I
it
can
by
do that
email.
over the next few days. I would just throw out there, though, now that I've done a little bit of outreach and I've read some of the reports, I think with Article 8, what we'll be looking at is definitional.
Yep.
Why are the components of the current Article 8 in there, and how do new components get brought in? What is the purpose of the article? And
And we have that perfect example of
with the
city
deputy director, right?
Deputy director. Yeah.
Of the
Yeah.
environment, yeah. So I think our bullet points will be more around not allowing that article to become messier, if you will.
Right.
And then with Article 9, which is a sort of a catch-all article, I'd like to just go back to Ron's point about the specific mention of sewage as a utility in the charter. I think an equally important or equally emerging concept just with these or like these boards, commissions, and committees is the idea of infrastructure and utilities. I certainly think that there's other articles where a vision of infrastructure and utility should be developed, not Article 9 per se, but I would tie Article 9 into whatever vision we're crafting around that. And to be bluntly specific, I think broadband telecommunication and some of the concepts of digital security that we've already discussed is hugely important right now and entirely undefined and unmentioned in the charter today. I would look to incorporate things like that as add-on points to Article 9 in the way Article 9 is written for whatever article we decide to put some of those larger concepts in.
Okay. Well, that kind of
Great.
flows into what's not in the charter, which Lawrence, I know, has talked a lot about the cybersecurity issue. Paul? No, okay, I thought he wanted to speak. All right.
No, I didn't say anything.
All right. Well, all good points. We really are moving along. I was looking at some of our notes from earlier in our when we started meeting in April, and we really are getting a lot of good information. So let's, we can all, myself, first off, we'll get some reports out to everybody, but get some of the bullet points pulled together so that Andy can start working on that mid-report. And I think as we do this, it will really help us pull together some of the information so that we can work on that work session. I'll follow up with Takia and Andy and Hillary and Paul as far as getting that put together.
And we all agree on us getting get our bullet points to one another, but really to Andy, but pretty quickly, like Monday of next week.
Yeah, that would be great. And I'll give him a call, or Paul, you or I could give him a call and give him a heads up of what, so he knows what he's getting when people start sending it to him.
Right. Right.
So, and I guess if you have a fourth or a fifth that you feel really have to put in, it can be added, but if we can try to keep it as the top three. Okay.
Paul, I will try to get you what I think are my 3 thoughts for the elections part of the article for you this weekend to review. So
That's great. I'll do the same. I suspect they're the same, but that's
Probably,
super. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Well, everybody's working really hard. I hope the members that couldn't join us tonight are enjoying their time off, or at least are safe, since I think I'm now getting the storm that you all had earlier today. Any other business, any other comments anybody would like to bring up?
No, thanks for doing a great job in the chair. Appreciate it.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
yes,
So,
thank you.
all right. Well, if I have a motion, we can adjourn at 7:14 is what my computer says.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
And all in favor?